This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Boy, that Bryce Harper guy doesn't seem to want to play in Philadelphia, does he? Chris Graham here on the podcast today, and we'll talk some baseball news or lack thereof. We'll also talk Duke, Virginia Tech. That's coming up tonight. Some good ACC action actually tonight, coming up with that Duke, Virginia Tech game. I think also North Carolina, Syracuse, I believe, play tonight. Let's make sure that's right. Looking at the ACC schedule for the week, Carolina hosting Syracuse at 9. That's the main event. I would have thought the Tech-Duke game would have been. I had to look at the schedule just to make sure of the times of these games. And let's actually start there, Duke, Virginia Tech. So, game on the schedule that, it's a game where Duke feels a little vulnerable. I don't think very vulnerable. Looked really good the other night in their win at Syracuse without Zion Williamson, also without Zion tonight in Blacksburg. But avenging a loss, if you want to say, to Syracuse earlier in the season. Also, when the Duke team was not at full strength, the final score Saturday night, they carried them 75-65. A game that was closer than that, much closer than that. Game played a 1 or 2 possession game much of the way on Saturday night, but Duke pulling away. R.J. Barrett having another solid game. He's looking pretty good. We keep talking about Zion Williamson being the top pick of the draft consensus. I mean, everybody's saying he's the next LeBron James type player. And Barrett, I've liked this kid. You've heard me on this podcast say this a lot. I really like that kid, and he started the season as the top pick in a lot of the mock drafts, and he's fallen all the way to number 2. But man, I tell you what. He was 14 of 20 from the field, 12 of 15 on twos, 30 points in the win, 7 assists as well. It just seemed like they couldn't stop him, and that's against the zone defense. I mean, 12 of 15 from 2 against the zone defense of Syracuse is going a long way. He was also in the win, the loss at Carolina, at home to Carolina, 11 of 22 from the field, 8 of 11 from 3. And for the most part, he's put some big numbers up on the board of late. He had the 8 of 15 performance against Virginia in that win in Charlottesville a couple weeks back. Barrett he's solid. He had 10 assists in the win, 10 assists, 23 points in the win over North Carolina State. That was a week and a half ago. I mean, Barrett's he's NBA ready now. You can project him exactly what he's going to be in the NBA right now. With Zion Williamson, you have to think about a few things, like he's 6'7", 285. He's much more suited to play in the post in an NBA and in a game in this day and age, 2019, where we don't really have a lot of pure post play, and he'll have to adapt a bit, get maybe a little thinner. I don't know that 6'7", 285 translates as well to the NBA. He might have to lose 15 or 20 pounds once he gets to the NBA just to get a little bit more speed, be able to be a little bit more on the perimeter, dribble drive, that kind of thing. So as talented, as athletic as he is, and also his outside game not as pronounced. With Barrett, you can say Barrett, he's the package. What you got right now at Duke will just get better in the NBA. He's already slashed to the basket as well as anybody I've seen in college basketball. In my 25 years of covering college basketball, he shouldn't be in college basketball, but that's another thing. His 3-point shooting is it's off and on. He's the Carolina game, 3 of 11 from 3, 6 of 10 against Virginia. I mentioned 4 of 17 in the first game against Syracuse from 3. He shot 30 shots in that game. So the 3-point shooting inconsistent, but that's something you work on with just repetition. And when you become a true professional instead of the one and done professionals you are like at Duke, he'll be able to spend more time on that, and there's no question he'll get that down. And once he gets that down, I mean, the sky's the limit for R.J. Barrett as far as that's concerned. And he'll be out there tonight. So Williamson not, Barrett and Reddish. Cam Reddish is another guy looked at as a top 5, top 10 pick. Honestly, I'm not the only one who probably says this. I don't see it. I mean, he looks like I've talked about how at the game at JPJ a couple weeks ago, went out and stood on the court and watched the Duke team, UVA team warm up, and everybody's watching Zion Williamson. Cam Reddish, when he walks by you, he's a big kid. He's every bit of he's listed as 6'8", 218. He is thickly muscled, incredible looking athlete, and when you see him run up and down the court, it's effortless. He doesn't drive the basket for some reason. He shoots a lot of threes. Don't get it. And he hasn't shot them well, which is really, really frustrating to see. From the perspective of when you watch him warm up, it's so fluid. Everything is so perfect. And then, the Syracuse game, he's 2 of 11 from the field, 1 of 8 from 3. The Carolina game, 10 of 23 from the field, 4 of 12 from 3. That's actually a good game for him, and you hate to say that because his numbers. 4 of 14 against Louisville. He was 5 of 8 against Virginia, and that's the game that I've continually called the anomaly. Duke 13 of 21 from 3 in that game. They're a 30% three-point shooting team. Made 61% in that game, and that's why they won the game. And he was 5 of 8, including a bank-in 3. But most of his games, 4 of 11 against Boston College from 3, 4 of 10 St. John, 3 of 8 Notre Dame, 1 of 8 Georgia Tech, 3 of 10 Pittsburgh, the 1 of 6 in the first game against Virginia. Most part, he's a guy who shoots a lot of threes and just doesn't make a lot of threes. And you can see it's there. It's there because when it's he's so confident, he's so fluid. They're just not falling, and it's hard to figure out how that is. What I'd like to see more out of him is more driving to the basket. Maybe would open things up and give him a little bit more daylight, and that would create better looks for him. But that'll come. When he gets to the NBA, that'll come. With repetition and being a professional and being able to practice more, shoot more. But so he's there. He's available certainly. So is Barrett. No Williamson. And this is why I say if Duke's at all vulnerable, they're on the road. Virginia Tech, Blacksburg's tough place to play. I say this all the time on the podcast. We talk about vis-a-vis UVA, Virginia Tech. Castle Coliseum is not tough for everybody because the fans don't come out in the great numbers with full throat for everybody. But when Duke or UVA or North Carolina's in the house, it's a tough place to play for those schools. And the sound collects. It's the seats are right on top of the floor. It's an old airplane hangar. It wasn't built for basketball. It was built for something else. It's been adapted for basketball. It's been in place for all these years. And the way Tech seats its students right above the visiting team basket. They're right above the bench there. They're loud. They're obnoxious. They're profane, and I mean that in a positive way. I think it's a really good home court environment for those games, for those three big opponents. It's a really, really, it's a tough environment for the visiting team in those situations, and it's going to be tonight because I think that Hokies fans will smell blood in the water, so to speak, with Williamson not being in the house. Now the challenge for Virginia Tech is one they've had now for a little while, is that Justin Robinson's still not in the lineup for Virginia Tech, and man, they're hanging around. I got to give them credit. Since he went down in that Miami game, and we're talking January 30th now, that's a 4-3 record for Virginia Tech. They've basically won the games you would expect them to have won. I will maybe throw in there at NC State, which was the first full game they played without Robinson way back on February 2nd. I don't know that you say at that time, especially that you say, well, we'll expect to win this one. NC State is a 20-win team. And that was the game that the Hokies famously won 47-24 final score. So the narrative has been they've won the games they're supposed to and lost the games that they probably were supposed to. They've lost to Louisville, Clemson, and Virginia. They played, I thought, all three pretty well. Virginia was a 6-point game. It was really more of a 10 to 12-point game, but at the end the final margin was 6. And give them credit, they played a full strength Virginia team that way at home. Lost at Clemson, by 8. Clemson actually was actually a 10-12 point game again, but they lost by 8. Louisville at home lost by 8. Louisville was playing really good basketball then. They're not playing as good at basketball now, but that game was still a 2-possession game with about a minute to go. Wins over Georgia Tech, Pitt, Notre Dame. So yeah, those games were games you expect to win. And now the competition ratchets up. It's they played last week against Virginia, so they've played recently against one of those top national teams. And they played Virginia well, but Virginia doesn't bring the athleticism even without Williamson at least with Barrett. I mean, I guess Virginia's got DeAndre Hunter, who's on that same level. Barrett will be the number 2 pick in the draft likely. Hunter will be somewhere between 6 and 9, 6 and 10 in the draft. And so yeah, they've played that level, and of course Tech's got its own lottery pick. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is looked at as a guy that will be a lottery pick coming out this year. 6'5", 205 sophomore. Didn't have a good game against Virginia. DeAndre Hunter shut him down. I don't know that you'll look at DeAndre Hunter is a better two-way player than R.J. Barrett or Cam Reddish. Both are those young men are more focused offensively. They do what they need to do defensively. Williamson of that group of one and done players is the best defensive player, and so I'm not sure who on Duke will check Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Certainly, no one will at the level defensively that DeAndre Hunter, who's my favorite for ACC Defensive Player of the Year, will. He's 6'5", so it's not going to be Trey Jones. Trey Jones would have been an interesting matchup with Justin Robinson, who's not part of the mix. But he's someone who gives up too much size to Nickeil Alexander-Walker to render him any kind of a check on Alexander-Walker. So it's and Alexander-Walker defensively matching up probably with Barrett, I would assume. Looking at the lineup, Tech is a team that without Robinson, they're limited in terms of numbers. They've got some athletes: Ty Outlaw, Ahmed Hill, Isaiah Wilkins off the bench are players that I like. Wabisa Abidi has stepped in as a starting point guard now for this will be his 8th start. I assume he'll start tonight because that's the way he's been starting for a while now. He will, he's done admirably considering he's not Justin Robinson. You look at the lineup. It's a short bench. 84. I'm looking at on KenPom.com the depth chart over the past 5 games. Not much of a depth chart. 84% of the time in the past 5 games, you've gone with the lineup of Alexander Walker, Abidi, Hill, Outlaw, and Blackshear. 84% of the minutes have gone to that group of 5. P.J. Horn is really the only. P.J. Horn and Isaiah Wilkins getting some time. Jonathan Kabongo getting a little bit of time, but by and large, it's been the starting 5, and then a little bit of Horn, a little bit of Wilkins. They go in terms of talented guys. Alexander Walker is an NBA talent. Outlaw and Hill are good college players. Beatty is young and he's playing above his head. He's got a lot of experience now that he wouldn't have thought he would have had earlier. Blackshear is interesting. I'm talking about this Virginia Tech Duke game through the prism of UVA basketball. Obviously, we primarily focus our sports coverage on UVA sports, and so when I say that Kerry Blackshear's season this year and what he's been doing this year reminds me of someone from UVA's past, Junior Burrow is what he reminds me of. Junior Burrow's senior season is what Blackshear reminds me of this year. And you look at his numbers of late, he's putting up some big numbers in a stretch of games here, dating back again to that Miami game. In fact, that Miami game, he had just 1.7 rebounds, actually 1.9 rebounds in that win, 82-70 win at Miami. But since Robinson went down, 13 points, 13 rebounds in the win at NC State. Let's look through here. 21 points and 5 rebounds in the loss to Louisville. I have to do some math because I'm looking at the Ken Pom, and they make you add up the offense and defensive rebounding. 17.7 rebounds in the loss at Clemson, then 16 and 4 rebounds with 8 assists in the win over Georgia Tech. 29 points, 10 of 11 free throw shooting, 8 of 9 from the field, 3 of 3 from 3 in the win over Pitt with 9 rebounds, 3 assists. The loss to Virginia, 23 points. He shot 9 of 10 from 2-point range, 10 of 14 overall, 13 rebounds in that loss to Virginia. Played all 40 minutes. And then the win over Notre Dame at Notre Dame, 22 points, 7 of 12 shooting, 14 rebounds for Blackshear in that one. And he's doing this. I mean, Blackshear is likely not an NBA player. And any Tech fans who are listening to this podcast, one, congratulations. Thank you for listening, to a UVA guy talking about your team. And so when I say I don't think Blackshear's an NBA player. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. He's a great college player. He'll make money playing professionally. overseas. He'll play somewhere. He's too good of a player to not play somewhere. I don't think he's NBA talent. Here's why. He's 6'10", so he's got size. He can shoot the three. I mean, he's, in his last, dating back to that Miami game, let's do some quick math here. He's 2 of 5, 3 of 6, 4 of 8, 7 of 11, 8 of 15, 9 of 17 from three. So, I mean, in today's game, big guys have to shoot three like anybody else, and he's 9 of 17. It's a slow release. He's not very quick. Just in general. What's interesting about that then is, so many times you see it when you watch a Tech game. He's used often. When I say high post, he sets up on the 3-point line quite a bit for this Virginia Tech team, so that Buzz Williams' offense can run backdoor cuts and some slip screens and that kind of thing, and keeps the middle open for all that action. And at 6'10", he's a guy that when he gets the ball out there on the perimeter, the guy defending him tonight, likely Marquise Bolden, I'm sure a little bit of Javin DeLaurier. You see the opposing big close out really quick on him, and I say he's not quick, but he's quick enough that he gets around those closeouts with just one little pump fake, and he can get all the way to the rim with a couple dribbles. And so I say all this, and I still say he's not an NBA player because it's not quick enough for the NBA level. But man, at the college level, he's effective as crap. He's really good at what he does at the college level. Because, he's 9 of 17 in his last 7 games from three. And, you respect it just enough. And so Bolden, DeLaurier, going to have to be careful about that. He's a guy that can get you in foul trouble in a different way than most 6'10 guys get you in foul trouble. He gets you in foul trouble clutching when he's dribble driving around you from the 3-point line. He can hit that three when he's open. And he's been effective from two. Man, you look at this from 2-point range last few games: 6 of 10 against Notre Dame, 9 of 10 against Virginia, 5 of 6 against Pitt, 4 of 8 Georgia Tech, 4 of 7 Clemson, 5 of 10 Louisville, 4 of 9 NC State. He's been effective, really, really effective lately since Robinson went down. It's the kind of thing that Buzz Williams would love to see him be able to continue that level of productivity once Robinson gets back. Obviously, things change when Robinson gets back. The stats are a little different, and it'll be interesting to see. I think this Virginia Tech team may struggle. I've seen teams struggle. Virginia struggled a few years ago. I've talked about this when Justin Anderson went down mid-season, came back late season. That was a 30-4 Virginia team that went 2-2 in his last 4 games with Robinson back in the lineup. They had played 10 games without him, went 9-1. And your rotations change. Guys are playing different times, different positions. There's different chemistry on the floor. And without a lot of time to work that out, that can be a problem. And Robinson right now looks like, nobody said this officially, but it looks like maybe coming back around the Florida State game for Virginia Tech, which is, I think it's March 5th. I'm going to look at that real quick. Yeah, March 5th, which will be their second to last regular season game. Florida State, Miami finish out the schedule for the Hokies next week. If he's back next Tuesday, that would be at Florida State. That would be huge for Tech, not because of what they may do in the Florida State game, but because of just, hey, he gets 30, 40 minutes, whatever on the floor. That game, 30, 40 minutes, Friday, March 8th at home against Miami. Those are 2 opportunities before the ACC tournament, at least 1 game in the ACC tournament. So that would be 3, maybe 4 games, whatever they get in the ACC tournament before the NCAA tournament starts. Some more chances at reps, everybody get used to each other again, etc. That the UVA team didn't have. Justin Anderson came back in the ACC tournament for UVA back in 2015, and that team that started 28-2 finished 2-2 because things were different, and it was a weird time to be reassimilating a top guy into your line. So I'm talking all around tonight. So how do things go tonight? Blackshear is a matchup problem for Duke. There aren't a lot of big guys in the ACC who are matchup problems. Duke struggled last week with Luke May, and Luke May's 6'8", 240. He doesn't play 6'8", but he really dominated Duke without Williamson in the post. 30 points, I think it was 30 points, 15 rebounds for May last week in that win over Duke without Williamson. He played 33 seconds in a game. And Blackshear, he can do some similar things. He's not as prolific a 3-point shooter as May, but he can make that shot. He's better in the post than May, and May was able to score a lot in the post on Duke in that game. So, I mean, that could be a problem for Duke. The lack of Duke does, or excuse me, Virginia Tech doesn't have the depth that Carolina does. They don't have the dynamic point guard, even though Cubby White didn't have a solid game. I would worry for Virginia Tech, Beatty at point guard matching up with Trey Jones. That's going to be a problem. White didn't have a good offensive game against Jones, but Jones had an even worse offensive game against White last week in that Carolina Duke game. And I think that could, that matchup tonight will certainly favor Duke. An intriguing matchup, and there's going to be, we're not covering the game tonight in Castle. We're going to be covering it from the home office, so to speak. But I would love to know how many scouts are there, not just to see the Duke kids. I mean, there's always a lot of scouts watching the Duke kids, but I would bet that there are teams that are looking at Barrett with, the number two pick slot. There might be some still looking at him at the number 1 slot too, but they're there to see and they're there to see him against Alexander Walker, because that's going to be an interesting matchup. Those guys are going to play a lot against each other in the NBA for years to come. But tonight, how they do, both defending each other, both offense against each other. I mentioned Alexander Walker had a really subpar game against DeAndre Hunter. Barrett is not the defensive player Hunter is, but Barrett is a sublime offensive player. So that matchup is going to be key tonight. Do they both score 30? It's possible they'll both score 30 in this game. And I think from Virginia Tech's standpoint, they're going to need Alexander Walker to go toe-to-toe with Barrett in this game. And then hold serve with Reddish. Don't let Reddish go off, basically. If he has his typical 3 for 9 from the 3-point range game and doesn't do anything from the 2-point part of the court offensively, you've done what you need to do there. I mean, if Outlaw and Wilkins off the bench can play the role there, and Medhill can just sort of hold serve there, this is a game that is there's a reason, I guess, that the Hokies fans are smelling blood in the water. Be careful with Alex O'Connell. He was huge in the win for Duke at Syracuse this past weekend. I think he had 5 threes in that game for Duke. Now, certainly Syracuse plays the zone defense, and you can't get out, you can't close out on everybody. And with Barrett having the huge game he had, part of that was that O'Connell was knocking down shots, and you had to think about him, and that opened up some driving lanes for Barrett. They really broke down that zone defense for about a 6-minute stretch of the second half. With what Duke was doing shooting threes in that game, with what O'Connell was doing shooting threes in that game, really opened up some gaps, and that was and that was really helpful to Barrett. Just stay sound, and if O'Connell goes off, he goes off. I think that's what you do. Virginia proved that. If Duke's going to shoot 13 for 21 from 3-point range, they're going to beat you, but they're not going to do that very often. And I think this is a game that, if the Hokies can establish early that they're in this game, not fall behind early, maybe even, if they can jump out and get a couple of early punches in, this can be an interesting one. If that crowd gets hot, that crowd gets loud, they get obnoxious and profane and everything else, they can carry their team. I think they can. It's possible that they can carry their team to an upset win tonight. And so that's a 7:00 tonight. Should be an interesting matchup, no question. As much thought as I put into that, that's I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Should be a fun one. Also in the ACC tonight, I mentioned again the other game of the night, and this is they got it in the wrong order. The North Carolina-Syracuse should not be the main event tonight, but it's at 9:00, and hey, it's going to be a good game. These two teams matching up. Ken Palm has it. I say good game. Ken Palm has it a 12-point win for North Carolina at home against a Syracuse team that, from day to day, you don't know what you're getting with Syracuse. They pounded Louisville last week and then lost by 10 to Duke. They're a team that has a win at Duke. They also lost at home to Buffalo, which is nothing to sneeze at. They're a top 25 team. Also lost at home to ODU, who's first in the CUSA. But Syracuse is Jekyll and Hyde from day to day. So, but Ken Pom has the Duke Tech game being a 4-point game. Duke winning on the road, but a 4-point game. So, so that should. But so getting back to the Syracuse Carolina game, the game's in Chapel Hill, and that's a part of the home court advantage. In terms of the predicted score outcome. You always hate playing a team like Syracuse. Kind of like we talk about in ACC football season. We won't talk about it anymore. Georgia Tech, for years under Paul Johnson, running the triple threat option. You play that once a year, and you have to play their system to beat them. You play Virginia, you got to beat their pack line. They run it better than anybody else, and you run their pace. And if you beat Virginia, you beat them at their game. If you beat Syracuse. And teams do. I mean, this Syracuse team this year is they're a good team, but they're 18-10 overall in the season. But if you beat them, you're beating them at their game. You're not beating them at your game, and so you're beating the 2-3 zone. They're big. You look at this team; they pretty much play. Let me pull their lineup numbers out here. Not quite as pronounced as Virginia Tech with the injury to Justin Robinson, but their starting lineup plays 53%. Actually, they're not their starting lineup. It's Dolezaj gets a lot of minutes for this team. In fact, Pascal Chukwu is a starting center, 7'2" senior. But Dolezaj comes off the bench, 6'10", 180. He looks like a third grader who happens to be 6'10". He's got such a young looking face, but their lineup of Howard, Boeheim, Buddy Boeheim, Coach Boeheim's son, Elijah Hughes, Dolezaj, and Brissett, 53% of their minutes in the last 5 games. Chukwu. Let's see, who does Chukwu replace in this lineup? Actually, Tyus Battle is. It's interesting. Tyus Battle getting less minutes. He's part of the second lineup for this group. So. So yeah, that's interesting to see that. That's fascinating to see that Battle's getting less minutes there as far as that goes. Boeheim getting a lot of minutes at the shooting guard slot. So that said, you beat them. They're big. I was talking about how big they are, and this is what Boeheim does. He plays the 2-3 zone. You got Battle at 6'6", Brissett at 6'8", Hughes at 6'6", Buddy Boeheim at 6'5". Frank Howard at 6'5", Chukwu at 7'2". I mentioned Dolezaj at 6'10". They extend that zone out. I mean, they got a zone defense will give you threes, but they're big on the wings, and so they'll get hands in your face when you shoot those supposedly what you think are open threes. They close gaps off well. Boeheim's got his philosophies, and he coaches it well. And this group is as good as any. This group's they've lost the 10 games. They're still a team that you would hate to play in the ACC tournament. You hate to play in the NCAA tournament. This is the kind of team that can with their defense, they can sneak a couple of games out and get to a Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four. And they got talent. I like Battle. I like Brissett. I like Howard. I like Dolezaj. I think they've got some good players here. And when you look at the matchup then with North Carolina, Carolina certainly is a team that would seem capable of playing well against the 2-3 zone of Syracuse. Luke Mays, a stretch 4 who can shoot threes. Cam Johnson plays 2 at 6'9", and he's a 3-point shooter. He's got some good range. Kenny Williams at 6'4" is a solid 3-point shooter. So. And Kobe White at 6'5", the point guard. I mean, they match up physically very well with Syracuse, and this Carolina team is equipped in one way that a lot of teams aren't. The best way to beat a zone is to beat it up the court. To grab the ball out of the net, grab the defensive rebound, force a turnover, and get up the court before the zone can really set up. And if you can. Score in transition, the zone defense isn't a factor. And this Carolina team is as good as any at the transition game. You look at the pace of play that this Carolina team plays at. I'm trying to get that number here. When you look at the matchup, let me just go straight to the Carolina page on KenPom. They average 75.0 possessions a game, 5th in the country, and so they're not afraid to get the ball up the court. That's what they do. Cubby White is at his best when he's getting the ball up the court. Now, just like anybody, they're going to have trouble scoring against the set defense. If Syracuse is able to score, it's always important for Syracuse teams. If they're able to be effective offensively, that makes their defense more effective, because if they can put the ball in the hoop, then you see Boeheim, he'll use a full court or three-quarter, half-court press and trap. Not as much to turn the ball over. He can certainly do that. Virginia, being a Virginia guy, we know that in 2016 the Elite Eight game turned with the full court press, getting Virginia out of its offense, creating some turnovers and transition opportunities. But often, what Boeheim will do is he doesn't really. I mean, if it creates turnovers, great. But if it slows you down, allows him to get his defense back, set that 2-3 up. That's when he's obviously when he's playing 2-3 zone defense. That's when he's at his best. And so. So that's going to be the chess match between these two teams. Can Syracuse be effective enough offensively to allow its defense to set up and then make Carolina slow down? If Syracuse is able to slow Carolina down, we saw Carolina have a hard time, except for about a 6-minute stretch in the Virginia game. When Carolina had to play offense against Virginia's set defense, they didn't really do well. That 6-minute stretch or so when they scored, I think it was a 21-3 run, something like 21-6 run, something like that. They were able to get out in transition. They got some easy baskets and really able to create havoc. But for a long stretch of that game, not able to get points on the board against that set defense when Virginia was effective offensively. So that's going to be the same kind of situation tonight. It's going to be a battle of wills in that respect, and so I'm looking forward to that. But I think Syracuse is more competitive than a 12-point game, but they do have less margin for error, certainly, than North Carolina. Both teams are very talented, but Carolina at home would seem to have the edge going in. So that's what we look forward to in ACC tonight. Let's see if there's any other games tonight. Those are the two. And there's also Miami at Wake Forest. We won't worry about that one quite so much. Two teams down towards the bottom of the standings. Got to play the games out. Of course, tomorrow night, Virginia at home against Georgia Tech. You want to say on paper an easy week. You might have heard Zach Peerless and I talking yesterday. Zach has his preview column on the AFP website. We posted that earlier today. They're still recruiting ACC athletes. Georgia Tech has played well in some games this year. They had a 8 or 10 point lead early in the second half at Duke. I mean, you don't overlook this team. You look at their record this year. They played Tennessee relatively tough very early in the season. They played a St. John's team that's probably an NCAA tournament team to a 3-point loss back in December. I remember that first Virginia Tech game. They lost at home by 3. Really played that Virginia Tech team well. They won at Syracuse by 14, but just a 4-11 record right now in the ACC. And a stretch here recently. They were 3-3 at one point. They've lost 8 of their last 9. The Duke loss was the first of that stretch. Carolina running away. I'm looking at that. The Virginia Tech game, the second Virginia Tech game, they lost by 8. They played Tech well both times, but a lot of double-digit losses in that stretch, and a big loss this past Saturday at Miami. So Virginia favored by 22 in this one, and then Virginia plays on Saturday against Pitt. So, when I say easy week, I mean, again, these are the ACC teams. They've got ACC players, ACC coaches, 2 home games, and then Virginia goes on the road to Syracuse next Monday night. Another Saturday, Monday turnaround for Virginia. Good, getting you ready for the NCAA tournament in a tough situation going to Syracuse, and then finishing out the regular season next Saturday at home against Louisville, return match with the Cardinals. So that's the layout for Virginia's next few games. As Virginia is tied at the top of the ACC, as we know, 3 teams at 12-2, Virginia, Duke, North Carolina. Those 3 teams are all in the top 5 of the national standings, which is this is the embarrassment of riches for the ACC. 3 teams there. You've got 6 teams total ranked. If Louisville's ranked in one of the 2 national polls. Virginia Tech and Florida State are comfortably in both polls in the top 20 nationally. And then Louisville, I think they're 24th in the coaches poll. You've got 8 teams that look like pretty solid NCAA tournament teams. Clemson is sort of iffy at this stage at 16-11. Overall, 6-8 in the ACC. But they're, everything else, all their other metrics look great. Their adjusted standing in the Ken Pom is 34, actually one position ahead of North Carolina State, who's at 35, and actually even a couple more ahead of Syracuse at 38, who have more solid resumes overall. But it just tells you that Clemson's in that mix. So the ACC could sneak 9 in again this year in the NCAA tournament if Clemson's able to to play well down the stretch. And then you have a big drop off from there, and you go from Clemson at 34. I'm just looking at the Ken Pom numbers. I don't have the net numbers up. But Clemson at 34 and Ken Pom, you go out. Then the next team is Miami at 69, and they're 12-14. You got basically Boston College is the only team in the bottom 6 with a 500 record overall, and they're 13-13. You got Wake Forest at 10-16 actually snuck out of the last place right now. Pitt's fallen to last place at 2-12 in the ACC after a promising start in non-conference play. The Panthers have really struggled here of late. But 9 teams in the ACC look like 8 look like to me pretty solid NCAA tournament teams, and I'm counting NC State in that mix. I think State's got a little bit of work to do. Actually, might even put Louisville in that mix right now too, with Louisville's little slide here of late. I think they're 2-5. Let me look at Louisville real quick. Louisville is 2-5 in their last 7. Started the ACC play at 7-1, now at 9-6. With the Syracuse loss last week, they were really never in that game. But man, losing the game to Duke with a 23-point lead at home, they lose to Virginia, 12-point lead at home. Clemson, they almost lost. They had an 8-point lead in the last seconds, and Clemson had the last shot to win the game in regulation. Been a real struggle of late for the Cardinals, but they finish up with Boston College, Notre Dame, then Virginia. If they go 2-1 down the stretch, they're an easy team to get in the NCAA tournament. As far as that goes, it's more of a matter of seeding for them. Looking at NC State real quick, and Jerry Carter and I will go down this line a little bit more in depth. In fact, tomorrow, Seth Meganson and I will talk more general NCAA tournament bracketology, and I'm sure we'll address these ACC teams with more focus. But you look at NC State, 8-7 in the ACC, 20-8 overall. Florida State, Georgia Tech, Boston College. At Florida State and Georgia Tech at home, Boston College away. Let's go 2-1 down that stretch or 10-8. Even if you lose your first round ACC tournament game, you've got 22 wins, 10 losses. You're an NCAA tournament team. Let's go look at Clemson here real quick. And again, we'll talk more in depth with Seth and then Jerry later in the week. But Clemson finishes out with Pitt. North Carolina at home, a big chance to get a potential marquee win there if you're the Clemson Tigers. That's this Saturday, coming up Saturday, at Notre Dame, and then Syracuse at home. So, you've got at Pitt, at Notre Dame. You got to win those games. They're road games, but you got to win those games. If you split North Carolina, Syracuse, you finish 9-9 in the ACC. You've got 19 wins. You probably need to win a game in Charlotte to get to 20. I mean, that's it's not a hard number. 20 doesn't mean anything from the tournament slush committee's standpoint. But I think with the resume that Clemson has already, if they can go 4-2 down the stretch, let's put it that way. If they can win a game in Charlotte, that would mean that they're playing on Thursday in Charlotte because they will be. Is that right? If they're ninth, if they're ninth, they're playing on Wednesday. They'll be in the 8-9 game on Wednesday. If they can win that 8-9 game, and that's against NC State, that'll be an interesting one. The way it's seated right now. They've got some work to do, but I think I've laid out a path for how all those teams can be competitive down the stretch in ACC play and get to the NCAA tournament. So, interesting. That should be interesting to see how that all plays out. And again, we'll talk more in depth with we'll talk more in depth with Seth Megginson tomorrow. We're recording a podcast talking. Seth's been doing a bracketology column for us the last couple of weeks. Good job. Seth's a guy that's he's been doing some work with us the last couple of years and love his work. And a young man with a journalism degree from Radford and trying to break his way into business. And he puts a lot of time into these projections. And so he'll have a chance tomorrow on the podcast to kind of explain his thinking with some depth. And so we'll talk with Seth tomorrow. And then Jerry Carter and I on Friday. The Friday podcast with Jerry tend to be those more freewheeling kind of things. And with on Friday it's good because there's no ACC basketball on Friday. So during basketball season, we catch our breath. We make sense of Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in ACC action. And we look forward to Saturday in ACC action. There's also some games on Sunday. The Sunday games have not been anything resembling marquee games this year. I've kind of noticed that the ACC's they're putting something on Sunday. They're not putting the big games on Sunday. So, but Jerry and I we'll spend more time this week, I'm sure, talking those NCAA tournament kind of things, especially those teams that are. I'm not going to put them on the bubble. But there's a lot of teams down there that have some work to do. We'll lay out that work they have to do. Let's see. So I do this until Bryce Harper signs. I'll keep doing this when we do these podcasts, and then when he finally signs, we'll break down where he signed. I mentioned it. I started the podcast off saying he really doesn't seem to want to sign with Philadelphia. We're finishing this podcast up. It's around 3:30 on Tuesday, and still nothing. Still nothing. We're hearing that Nolan Arenado is finalizing a deal with the Rockies. That would be an 8-year, $260 million deal. So not the amount of money that Machado just signed for with the Padres, Manny Machado, but a greater average annual value than Machado. And Arenado is not yet a free agent. He's actually he'll be. I think if I remember reading this right, and I'll click on the story here real quick to refresh my memory. I think he's free agent eligible after next season, or after this season. It's 2019. Yeah, this is actually the calendar year 2019. So he's playing out the last year of his team control from a money standpoint, and he's avoiding free agency. He and the Rockies are avoiding free agency for him with this extension, and so that's huge for the Rockies, huge for Arenado. Boy, Arenado at third base. I'm a Nats guy. We cover the Nats here on the podcast. Anthony Rendon is a stalwart, foundational piece for that Nationals team. Arenado is setting the market here. Rendon is also his contract status comes up after this season, and so Arenado is the guy that keeps Rendon from winning Gold Gloves. He puts up bigger offensive numbers. He plays in Colorado, but he puts up bigger offensive numbers out there. And so he'll get so that's the big news today. And I wonder what impact this has on Harper, because what we've been hearing about Bryce Harper the last few days. So I think if I remember, if I can trace the rumor mill dating back to, say, last Thursday, Friday. Last Thursday or Friday, it seemed like that a lot of opinion was, okay, the Nats are back in it, maybe for a short-term deal, because it's been the case that it feels like it's a Phillies have been the leaders in the clubhouse since the opening of free agency, but he's not signing with Philadelphia. So what's the deal there? And then this weekend it seemed like, okay, he's going to sign with Philly. It's imminent. It's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen in 10 minutes. It's going to happen 3 days from now. But it's going to happen. And now that's waned, and we're being told that the Dodgers are a contender again, and again talking about a short-term but big money deal. Big money in the sense of huge, 1, 2, 3 year deal, but not the 10-year deal that we've been told Harper wants. So, all that said, I was texting last night with my friend Brian Gokenauer, who I would love to lure to be a member of this podcast team down the road. He has a lot of great insight, but just for whatever reason doesn't think that he does. We talk about wrestling a lot. We talk about baseball a lot. And so his first text to me last night was, boy, it doesn't seem like Harper wants to sign with the Phillies, does it? And that's, so I start the podcast off that way because, yeah, you're right. I mean, Brian, you're right. Fans who out there notice the same kind of thing. If he wanted to sign with the Phillies, he'd be a Philly now. He's trying to do everything he can to not sign with Philadelphia. And so, but now, you've got Machado 10 years, $200 million. You've got Arenado 8 years, $260 million. If you're Bryce Harper and you think that you're the best player in baseball, one, you're not Mike Trout, but two, if you think that, do you sign for less than what those two guys signed for? So I wonder what the impact might be there. Does that make him go to Philadelphia despite the fact he doesn't seem to want to go to Philadelphia? We'll have to see. Let me hit refresh one more time because we're finishing up the podcast here. And nope, no news. No news. In fact, no news. So we'll have whatever we have. If there's signing news between now and next podcast, I'll write about it and we'll talk about it on the next podcast. In fact, my next podcast is a NASCAR podcast. If you're listening to this podcast, it's about 3:30 on Tuesday. It'll be up online about 3:45 on Tuesday. 5 o'clock today, recording a NASCAR podcast with Rod Mullins, and we'll have that. And that'll be coming up later today as well. And then tomorrow, kind of signposting ourselves out. Tomorrow we've got Seth Megginson, and then I've got the UVA basketball game. That's tomorrow night, 7 o'clock tip, UVA Georgia Tech. Scott German and I will break things down after that game. Then Friday we jump ahead and we'll have Jerry Carter on talking all things ACC. And let's see. So that's coming up the rest of this week. I want to thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for clicking on our stories. You make what we do possible with your interest. And if you have anything you want us to talk about on a future podcast, write about on the website, feel free to email me at AugustaFreePress2@gmail.com. Comment on the website. Comment on the podcast page. You can tweet at me at AugFreePress. You can fly a plane above my house, have some guy write out a message that way. Carry a banner. There's all kinds of ways. The others are more effective ways. But anyway, we love to hear from you and love to address what you want to see addressed. For all of us here at Augusta Free Press, signing off, Chris Graham. Why?